bigger than life. But being the son of a small-town preacher and a mom who was a part-time secretary, our family didn't have the money to go to some of the historic sites like we have here in our nation's capital. And so, years ago, just a few years after I was, or a year or so after I was governor, Tonette and I had the chance to go to Philadelphia. We jumped in. And we got up early in the morning, and we went past the Liberty Bell, and then we went to Independence Hall. And I got to tell you, as someone who loved our founders, I was ready to be blown away. Blown away. And we walked in there early that day and looked at it. If any of you have ever been there, you know that the room itself is not much bigger than the stage. As we looked at the chairs and we looked at the desks, they're not much different than the ones you're in right now, except they're a little older there than these. But it made me think for a moment, these were ordinary people. Ordinary people who did something quite extraordinary. You see, they didn't just risk their political careers. They didn't just risk their business ventures. These were people who literally risked their lives for the freedoms we hold dear today, right? Moments like that remind me that what makes America great, what makes us exceptional, what makes us arguably the greatest country in the history of the world, is that in moments of crisis, be it economic or fiscal, be it military or spiritual, there have been men and women throughout our history who have stood up and made decisions that think more about the future of their children and their grandchildren than they did about their own political futures. Ladies and gentlemen, here tonight, this is one of those moments in American history. Let this be the time. Let this be the time when we can tell future generations what we did to make America great again, right? That's why we created ouramericanrevival.com, to get out and tell the story about what we need to do to transform America, to
make right to work national,
to move this great country forward. But you know, the biggest challenge to that is just up the way, just down the river, up the Potomac, to Washington, or as I like to call it, 68 square miles surrounded by reality. Right? Today in Washington, we have a president who thinks we grow the economy by growing Washington. Think about that. In the last year, we saw a report that showed that 6 out of the top 10 counties, 6 of the top 10 wealthiest counties, according to median income, are right here in the D.C. area. They think growing the economy is growing Washington. Well, I got news for them. We believe in America that is growing the economy in cities and towns and villages all across this great country. We think that's the way to go forward. We understand that people create jobs, not the government, and we're going to help the people of this great country create more jobs, create more careers, create more opportunities. Now, up the way there in Washington, we have a president who measures success in government by how many people are dependent on the government. We should measure success by just the opposite, by how many people are no longer dependent on the government. We understand that true freedom and prosperity does not come from the mighty hand of the government. It comes from empowering people to live their own lives and to control their own destinies. That's the American way. You see, here in America, there's a reason why we celebrate the 4th of July and not April 15th, because in America, we celebrate our independence from the government, not our dependence on it. Our independence from the government, not our dependence on it. That's the American way. And up the way in Washington, we have a president who draws lines in the sand and fails to act, a president who calls ISIS the JV club, who calls Yemen a success, and who calls Iran a country we can do business with, and to add insult to injury, whose former Secretary of State actually gave a reset button to the Russians, a reset button. We need a leader in America who stands up and realizes that radical Islamic terrorism is the threat to our way of life and to all freedom-loving people in the world. cannot wait till they bring the fight to American soil for our children and grandchildren. We need a leader who will stand with Israel. And we need a leader who understands that when the Prime Minister and leader of our longtime ally asked to come to Congress to share his concerns about Iran, we should show him and his country our respect. We need to show the world that in America you have no better ally and no greater enemy. In America, we will stand up for what is right and stand against what is wrong. That's what we need in America. You know, I think back to 2009 when Tonette and I were first thinking about running for governor. We sat down and thought about it. And we talked about it. We ultimately prayed about it. And we knew it'd be tough. But we got in that race for governor back then because we were worried that our sons, Matt and Alex, who are now 19 and 20, would grow up in a state that wasn't as great as the one we grew up in. And I got to tell you, as parents, that was unacceptable. And so today, many years later, I'm proud to tell you that because of our reforms, our state is indeed better than the state I grew up in. We took on the powerful special interest in Washington, and we returned the power back into the hands of the hardworking taxpayers. They didn't like that. They tried to recall me. They may be their #1 target, but in the end, we showed that we can fight and win for the hardworking taxpayers. Because of that, in our state, we don't have seniority or tenure anymore. We can hire and fire based on merit. We can pay based on performance. We can put the best and the brightest in our classrooms, and we can keep them there. And you know what? It's working. It's working. Our school scores are better. Our ACT scores are second best in the country. Our graduation rates are up over the past 4 years. Our reading scores are up over the past 4 years because we put the power back in the hands of the hardworking taxpayers and the people they elect to run their school boards. On top of that, we were able to take a state where the unemployment rate in 2010 was 9.2% at its peak. It's now down to 5.2%. We're a state that has been taxed and taxed and taxed, and today I'm proud to say, after 4 years as governor, we've reduced the burden on hardworking taxpayers by nearly $2 billion. And get this, a typical homeowner in our state is paying less in property taxes now than they were paying 4 years ago. When my budget is done over the next 2 years in 2016, they will pay less than they paid in 2010. How many other governors in America can say that? We've led the way with lawsuit and regulatory reform. We defunded Planned Parenthood and signed pro-life legislation. We enacted concealed carry and passed Castle Doctrine. And we passed a law in our state that says if you want to vote, you need to vote legally. It should be easy to vote, but hard to cheat. In our state, we passed a law that says you need a photo ID to vote in the state. And just breaking, as of next week, Wisconsin will become the 25th state in America that allows workers the freedom to choose whether they want to work for a company or So how do we do that in a state that hasn't
You take the rights away from workers.
Apparently the protesters
Fuck you.
But you know what? Those voices can't drown out the voices of the millions of Americans who want us to stand up for the hardworking taxpayers. A state that hasn't gone Republican for president since 1984. That's more than 30 years ago. In fact, that was back when I was in high school and I actually had a full head of hair. But you know why we did it? We did it without compromising. We stood up and said what we were going to do, and then we did it. We showed that fighting and winning for the hardworking taxpayers could make a difference. And not only did our base stand up for us, we won the last election with nearly 12% of the independents, because